he stepped out from the alleyway and into sudden light. He did not normally spend much time in the sun, and its warmth had become an unfamiliar sensation. His eyes closed reflexively as he lifted his face upward and let the warmth bathe his skin. The muscles of his face relaxed, and he breathed deeply and lazily for a moment, as the remnants of what seemed to be a dream played behind his eyes. He imagined walking from the house to the well to fetch water. He remembered that he would sometimes stand for several minutes just feeling the sun on every part of exposed skin, listening to the animals bleat, cluck, and bray, and smelling the hay, mud, and dried herbs that Tanti hung in the dark, cluttered hut. He opened his eyes and shivered despite the warmth on his cheeks. It had been a while since he had daydreamed like that. He did not want to remember the family that sold him for a couple of warm fruit pies. He did not want to remember that he had not been loved. For years, every night, after he helped Tanti or his aunties grind flour, tend to the stove, restrain or slaughter new livestock, clean the cages, organize the pantry, or do whatever they needed done, he would fall asleep, wondering what he had done that made his family exchange him for a little bit of food. He realized that tears welled in his eyes. He shook his head a bit too violently and wiped them away roughly with his sleeve before they fell. He was a big boy now. He didn't need anyone but Tanti and the aunties. They had cared for him, fed him, taught him so many things, and took him to so many strange and wonderful places. All they asked in return was obedience. He had seen what they had done to so many bad children. Bad piglets who wailed and snotted and kicked and scratched. He was not like them. He would do, and did, anything they asked of him. He squinted. Suddenly the sun was irritating and overwhelming. He continued on the route he was told to follow. When he reached his destination, he would keep his eyes and ears open for secrets that Tanti might be able to use and profit from. He would use what his magical family had taught him to defend himself or carry out tasks. They had made him big and strong, and everyone around him treated him like an adult. He had to hold back giggles when people called him Sir. It was a fun game, but he was very serious when he had a task. They told him not to drink liquor, or ale, or wine, or sleep with other people in his bed, and he followed every order perfectly. He was a very good child. He would make Tanti proud. Femi's bare feet padded softly against the wide, sturdy planks of the main deck. A heavy cloak of moisture, more humidity than sweat, clung to his mostly naked body as he skirted the halos thrown by the few lanterns that hung from the masts and railing. He crept through the shadows. Glancing up at the black, profound sky, he saw no moon nor stars, and he felt no wind nor movement with the current. The ship did not even groan or creak as it rested there, still and balanced like a cart abandoned at the side of a road. This specter of absence had taunted the ship for the last several days. The stillness made him expectant, as if he knew that someone would tap him on the shoulder at any moment. Several members of the crew had complained about bad dreams and had begun to look at him and the others in what they called the cursed crew from the corners of their eyes. Conversation stopped abruptly when any of them, Misa, Hurugor, Wertnob, Tranquilla, Drugared, or himself, came into view and continued in whispers after they passed by. Everyone knew something was not right. It seemed the crew now blamed them. Femi had always swum to hunt fish and explore. But after unburdening himself to Misa and connecting with his fellow Cursed, he had taken to swimming at night to explore and reconnoiter without attracting too much attention. Over the weeks, he had met several sentient water people and beasts who, when he told them he was looking for an evil entity that bargained and tricked people to destroy them, had pointed him in this direction. They had not heard of Tanti Bone Tosser, but several said she sounded like Enti Dredjamuk, who had murdered a great guardian and now defiled it by living amongst its bones. Some had their own tragic encounters and, seeing him as a kindred victim, either gave or sold him potions, scrolls, and devices that would hopefully help him and his friends defeat it. With his new occupation of nighttime exploration, he slept most of the morning and turned much of the kitchen preparation work over to a newer mate named Grecian, who knew enough about cooking to cover Femi's absence. But the crew was correct. The environment had become very wrong. And early this morning, when Femi and his familiar slipped back aboard the ship after investigating the depths, he noticed a pool of seawater that he himself had not caused beside the aft ladder where he now stood. With a look both fore and aft, Femi swung himself over the railing and climbed down the ladder. Just before his feet met the still surface of the water, he looked down into an expanse as black as the sky above, and briefly wondered if someone from the ship had slipped beneath the waves this night. And why? Were they waiting for him just below? He suppressed these thoughts. He was on edge. Thinking of those who depended on him, he pushed such thoughts behind him and slid, silent as a blade, into the cold blackness. As soon as his head was completely submerged, Femi felt something thick and muscular twine around his ankle and pull. In shock, he screamed soundlessly as all of the oxygen flushed from his lungs in several large bubbles. He flailed his arms and kicked with his free leg, trying to heave himself back to the surface. The first breath of cold seawater numbed his lungs, and his body forgot for a moment that he could breathe. But that was only one challenge conquered. He summoned a light and saw what looked like a snake or a tentacle thicker than his ankle had hold of him. It looked gray in the minimal light and seemed to lead straight down, except for the coils that gripped him fast. He did not know what had hold of him, what its intent was, or how deep it would take him. If it meant to make a meal of him, he might be able to fight it off, or at least make it think twice. But just because he could breathe did not mean he could withstand the depths that this thing likely came from. As he gathered his strength to attack, he thought of his love and hoped that, if he perished this night, his companions would still seek her out and do what they could to rescue her and make the villain pay. He focused his light downward and saw a writhing mass of teeth and tentacles beneath him. But strangely, beside it was a large, stocky woman clad in coral and seaweed. She was smiling and beckoning to him. As soon as their eyes met, the burly limb that held him released slightly and now seemed to guide him downward rather than snatch him. In his mind, he heard a cheerful welcome. "Hello, Mr. Femi. I know what you seek. I know where your wife is," she said in a chipper manner. "I can free her safely and bring her to you. My sister's curse will be broken, and you can both live wherever you wish." "How?" Femi croaked, unused to communicating this way. "Who are you?" "Just call me Auntie." "We can be together? We can be together?" She smiled, and the tentacle fully released him. As it retracted into the swirling knotted mass just behind her, she stroked it absent-mindedly. "Clever man. You have learned from your experience. Yes, together. And you can be as happy as you can be under the circumstances of your history." Although there was no way he could see it, Femi looked upward toward the ship, where the remainder of the cursed crew likely slept, unaware of the plot being suggested below them. "The best outcome you can hope for is that you manage to kill my sisters and me. You would still have to risk your life to avenge their situations before they help you find your wife. You would still have to find a safe way to free her and break the curse." She spread her arms wide and smiled benevolently. "I can do all of that. Leave the ship and come with me, and your tale of misery and solitude will be over. If not..." Her amiable smile faded, and as her outstretched arms returned inward, the monstrosity slowly opened its mouth, wide enough to swaddle Femi's entire body. He saw that the tentacles came from inside an envelope of membrane that billowed with the faint current caused by its own movement. Teeth as long as his hand ringed the edges of the form, and rows of smaller teeth jutted backward towards its black center. It seemed able to turn itself completely inside out to accommodate whatever function it was currently engaged in, whether movement, attack, or consumption. As if it had merely yawned, the gullet gently narrowed, and only tentacles and the ring of large teeth were again visible. "If not," she repeated, "your tale ends here. You die alone. Your wife dies alone. And the one that comes out on top is my pet, because she gets a tasty meal." Femi pretended not to be intimidated by either the woman or her beast. "Why help me?" he asked with feigned bravado. Her friendly smile returned. "I am a bystander in most of your stories. Your suffering does not make my life better or worse, and your situation is particularly suited to my realm. I can easily resolve it." She sighed heavily. "My sister knows you are near. I am obligated to help her and will destroy you all, one by one. One less member of your party means one less obstacle. I offer you an escape from the coming bloodshed. Whether that escape leads to reunion with your loved one, or a quick but painful death is up to you. Femi remained silent for a few moments, but only a few. Where are we going? I can't survive the pressure if we go much deeper. Now the woman beamed, her teeth yellow-green in the light. The creature opened up again, but the inner teeth seemed to have retracted or been covered by another membrane. Only rows of bumps were within. Make yourself comfortable. When we get home, I will accommodate. Femi allowed the tentacles to gently place him within itself. As the fleshy shroud sealed around him, he pulled his light in with him. It was a close fit, but was not tight. He could hear his host giggling in his mind. I don't think I have ever had anyone come to my house as company before. The boy is away on an errand, so it will be interesting to have someone to talk to again. This will be a treat. The descent began, but it was not gravity that pulled him, but some kind of propulsion of the creature that propelled him downward in spurts. As the thick leathery skin undulated around him, in his mind, he watched smaller tentacles climb back over the ship railing, reaching, holding, contracting, pulling itself forward as stealthily as Femi himself had slipped into the water. He watched as the porthole of Misa's cabin opened and the tentacles slipped inside, slithered up to Misa's bed, secured themselves to the wall over her head, and tapped the sleeping figure it found there on the forehead. He witnessed Misa rouse quickly and felt as if she looked directly at him as she blinked and asked, "Where's Femi?" He was able to maintain contact with his familiar long enough to tell it to lead his friends to the cabinet, where he kept the water-breathing and underwater scrolls, potions, and items he had scavenged, bartered, and, yes, stolen. He hoped they managed to get into the water before the tiny trail of plankton lost the faint luminescence he had imparted to them. And then he was out of range, wrapped in the mouth of an abomination that was controlled by a fiend, and hurtling down, down, down.